Okay, but did you stop and say, hey, it's me?
No, it's so funny because I hadn't seen them in years. Like, they didn't recognize me. They were like, "You are glowing. What's your secret?" And I said, "Honey, I'm healing." Hi, welcome back, everybody, to Honey, I'm Healing. I am one of your co-hosts, Renee.
Hey guys, this is Irina here.
And Irina, what are we going to be talking about today?
Funny how this topic even came about because today is 4th of July and my husband was like, y'all should talk about being an independent woman and how you claimed your independence. And I was like, absolutely not. But we can talk about codependency.
Happy No Codependence Day.
Yeah.
Instead of Independence Day.
Yeah, that's good.
I was reading through some notes. There's a really famous book called Codependent No More, and I'm blanking on the name of the author here. Her name is Melanie Beattie. So this is a book that, I mean, it's got almost 18,000 reviews on Amazon, 4.7 star rating. It's very well known. And so I think that this book is read a lot in AA groups or like substance abuse programs because codependency is so linked to family systems or to people who struggle with addiction or any kind of substance abuse. So I think kind of in a backwards way, that's maybe how I heard about it. But I was reading through some of this stuff and it was rude. It was so rude because it was like they were reading my mail. I was like, wait, that's me. And so is that. And so is that.
When is the first time you had heard the word codependency or even found out what it means?
Well, okay, so the first time that I heard about it was actually in church. And it was when I was an intern. This was like my first reimmersion back into faith. This was me coming into a church culture that felt really fun and exciting and new after leaving Lutheranism and kind of reestablishing my faith. So I was in a really vulnerable spot. And I had a really amazing group of people circle around me. But one of them was arguably like my best friend in the group, or at least one of them. And she was really high maintenance emotionally. I remember she would be like really volatile, kind of. She took things like personally. Anyway, all that to say, I remember a fellow intern of mine pulling me aside and saying, "Hey, I think that you're kind of like being a little bit codependent here." And I remember like cocking my head to the side and being like, huh? Like, what is that? Because, and I found this out, there is no like strict definition of it because it's not in the DSM. And that's what blows me away. It's something that so many people struggle with. It's characterized as an illness, yet it is not on paper defined. And I think that that's where so many conflicting beliefs and arguments and all of that breaks down.
So I actually think that a lot of codependent relationships really are started with your parents. Start with your parents and specifically your mom. I remember kind of like what you said, I had my aha moment when I was about 20 years old. And at the time, my mother-in-law, she was really kind about it, but she was like, I think you're being a little codependent here. And I actually applaud and love that people do that because even if you're not dealing with codependency, you should know what it means so that you can help those around you because sometimes they don't know it for themselves and then they have this aha moment. And that led me to doing a little Google research and reflection. So at the time, I had a really close friend who was going through some really heavy feelings, suicidal thoughts. And it was really tough because when they did want to act out on their plans, they would involve me in them, like in the heat of the moment. And that was really heavy, very heavy. I'm talking like in the middle of the night, wake up with my phone ringing. And it still kind of haunts me to this day.
Yeah.
When I get a call from my friend. But I remember confiding in her, and that's when she was like, I think you might deal with that. And it led me to really ponder on, hey, she's right. These are areas where, I may be trying to save this person from their pain, super codependent. And then I think there's a healthy dose of caring for someone that doesn't automatically mean you're codependent. There's a healthy dose of like being hurt for someone because you love them and care for them. So that's when I had my, what is that?
Yeah. Oh, you brought up such a good point. I think, first of all, I'm so sorry that you went through that, because as somebody who has been very well acquainted with what, like, I just really empathize with you in that. I know exactly what that's like, and it's so hard. But with my circumstance with this person at church, it was a really interesting place to be in, because I was kind of taught that, like, we're supposed to care for people like that, and we're supposed to, like, be there and, love people like that. And, that's, I think, one of the, I know we talked about kind of deconstructing a couple episodes ago, but it's still something that I'm learning to navigate. It's, how do I care appropriately without forsaking myself? And, like the Bible talks about, love your neighbor as yourself, not love your neighbor more than yourself. And with this person that I was dealing with, I would take on whatever they were feeling and carrying it with them. And that manifested later. Actually, I realized it later. It had been going on for a long time. Once I started to do a little bit more research on what codependency actually is, because the name, again, is very misleading, I realized that this perfectly describes my relationship with my dad. And when I stepped back from that and was understanding that I don't know where his pain ends and mine begins, that's where I was like, all right, we gotta take a step back here. And that's a huge reason I went no contact with my dad. And I understand that that's not possible, or that's not the best option for so many different people in different circumstances, but it really helped me gain some perspective in doing that. And I'm excited to get into kind of some steps on how we can combat codependency later. But
yeah, when you said that little quote about, I don't know where his pain ends and where mine begins, that's something you would read in a novel, and it would be so romanticized, or you'd see it in a movie. And I think movies and books romanticize codependency so much. And we learn from that. We learn that those are okay behaviors. I feel like when I read books with bad communication styles or codependency, I'm like, ew, unhealthy, toxic codependency. I don't like it.
Red flag.
Yeah, but yeah, people like create that experience for themselves too through that.
Yeah, it is a learned thing. It's a learned behavior. It's a learned coping mechanism, because that's ultimately what it is. And when I started to uncover a lot more about what codependency was and what that looked like for me, I realized that for me, and this is not everybody's experience with it, but specifically with my dad, I was focusing on his pain and helping him and being that crutch for him because I didn't want to address the pain that I was feeling from his decisions.
Yeah.
And that was such a hard thing for me to do because it made me question what my motive actually was for helping him. It made me feel like it wasn't a pure thing. And we can kind of unpack that a little bit maybe, but I kind of came to this conclusion of my motives were still pure because at the end of the day it's my dad and I love him and I care about him so much, but
Yeah.
it made me question, what my motives were in it.
I think why it's so strong in family relationships is because a part of our identity, especially with your parents, like your foundation, your identity, like is kind of intertwined with your parents.
It's been a huge point of contention for me too because I feel biologically that I owe them. Like they gave me life and I'm obligated to be there for them and I am obligated to be loyal to them at my expense. And that's what family looks like. That's what love looks like. Like blood is thicker than water. And no, it uncovered so much dysfunction and pain in my family system that I didn't even realize was there. Or that, actually, no, I'll take that back. I did realize it was there. I just didn't want to address it. And it's like the longer that it went on, the more afraid I was to address it. But it was one of the best things I ever did for myself. It was confronting it. And yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. But so in the book, give me some of the behaviors and kind of definition of codependency.
Yeah, so she defines it as a reaction to stress in which a person becomes obsessed with another and loses sight of themselves.
I found an article on healing codependency and her definition very similar to what you said, but worded a little bit differently, where it has a lot to do with your identity, whether you're rescuing someone or overly focused on helping them. Your identity gets defined by what you do rather than who you are. So what you do for other people. So that's where I think codependency is really defined, is if it changes your like inner being, your identification of who you are, because through the whole process you lose sight of yourself. So it's not just caring for someone. Not all caring traits are codependent. Not all clingy to your new boyfriend traits are codependent. I think that gets thrown around really easily, is if you are in a new relationship and you're so excited to be with that person all the time, you're automatically labeled as codependent. I don't think that's what codependent means.
No.
But I hear that one all the time.
I haven't heard that. I refer to those people, I think it's a colloquial thing of a stage 5 clinger. It's like someone that is so enmeshed in their partner that they lose sight of themselves. But
well, yeah, and that could be its own identity issue, not necessarily
100%, because you don't know who you are, so you're clinging to what.
So it's kind of like the fulfillment you get from what you do or who you can be for this person. And on here, some of the behavior traits were difficulty knowing what they want or need. You put everyone else's needs ahead of your own. You don't have boundaries. You're not able to really express your feelings of hurt and anger. You don't want to rock the boat. You want to keep everyone happy. And you don't have self-care habits. And you don't trust your own intuition or perceptions, and low self-esteem. Was there anything else that you wanted to add on there?
No, yes, but literally me.
Oh,
all of that.
I
I
think
my
I don't think
my
that at
face
all.
during that, I was like, no, oh my gosh, Irina. Oh, I've come a long way out of that, but even there are still aspects where I'm like, oh, like
There was
yeah,
one
it's
I
so
read
me.
where I
So
was like, oh, okay, I can see this in Renee, through like the hurt that you've
yeah.
gone through your relationship. I can see that. Um, but give yourself a little bit more credit.
Oh yeah, I've come a long way, and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes. Yeah.
So some of the according to Codependent No More, some of the characteristics of codependency are putting responsibility in the wrong place. So what this will look like is codependents see themselves as responsible for everyone else, and they don't take responsibility for themselves. Very much to what you had said. Codependents neglect themselves in favor of others. They fear being a burden. Yep. And then the third point here is that codependents can't see themselves clearly. They can't receive help or take responsibility because they've repressed their feelings, needs, and personality. It's me. Hi.
Hi,
I'm the
I'm the
problem.
problem.
It's
It's
me.
me. I really love this whole singing thing we've got
Yes.
going on every episode.
I know. It's like, what's the karaoke going to be today? Anyway, I think as a two, I have so much tension with all of
Ooh.
these. Oh, I have so much tension with all of these because it's such a fine line for me of this this natural personality, this giftedness in me to really care and be passionate about caring for others, and then really teetering on the line of codependent. And it's like it's a full cannonball into that pool. It's not like you dip your toe in one at a time. It's full cannonball for me.
Yeah. I've always how like if I can give one definition of codependency through the lens of like my own experience, I've always seen codependency as if that person is not okay or the situation is not okay, then I can't be okay. Is that what you feel
Yeah.
in your life too?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've definitely dealt with that in relationships, and I feel like I've come such a long way in creating my own security.
Yeah.
But that to me,
Yeah.
that's kind of always been my definition. And it's also been linked to creating boundaries. I'm so huge on having boundaries and allowing others to save themselves in their own dysfunction and me not trying to save them. And I credit my mother-in-law at the time for that because she taught me that.
I love that. That's women supporting women right there.
Yeah.
I love that. You know? No, it does kind of go back to an identity thing. It's just misplaced identity, and it's misplaced it's low self-esteem is what it is too, because if when you don't know who you are, you're going to death grip your relationship with somebody because that tells you who you are when I mean, it's a matter of perception, I guess, at the same time, but it's what's so frustrating to me because there's no proper definition of it. And where there's more ambiguity, there's a lot more confusion. There are a couple causes that I found for codependency specifically. A reaction to prolonged and often extreme stress. So I can think about like in your circumstance with your friend, that's a really stressful, really traumatic experience. So it makes sense being pushed towards codependency because you care so deeply. Like that makes a lot of sense. It's associated with substance abuse because substance abuse is a clear cause of stress. So I think that's more for the addict. And it can also be caused by underlying family systems. Families that discourage open communication are at a high risk for codependency. That's Midwestern family systems right there. It's brushing everything under the rug. It's being passive aggressive. It's not talking about things because it's like Thumper's rule. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. That is true, but it can also be super weaponized. Okay, what are your thoughts on that statement? Because I have my own, but I want to hear yours.
I sometimes use it with Haven. I love it. I think appropriately, when you have something that's not nice to say about another person, don't say it. If it's harming to them, if it's beneficial for the relationship, then it's not necessarily it's not a not nice thing. It's vulnerability.
I would agree with that. Or for me, I contextualize that phrase, Thumper's rule, with gossip. And that only gossip. For some reason, I don't know why that is, but if it's about my experience that somebody has given to me, or like my experience with somebody, and it's part of my own testimony, and it's true, I don't see I don't know. No. It's like, maybe you should have treated me better. I'm not going to withhold the truth here because to save face for you. No.
Mm-hmm. I think it comes down to intentionality.
Right. Yeah. That's fair.
When you said passive aggressiveness, I think that's a big trait to codependency, is if you're a passive aggressive person. And if you I hesitate saying this, but it coincides with passive aggression, resentment.
Yeah.
I think those two.
Well, okay, let's unpack that for a second, because with passive aggression, there's no healthy outlet for you to release whatever you're experiencing or feeling, because you're withholding in the context of, this is what I was taught to do, and this is what I was told will create the safest environment for me. I'm going to dance around the fact that they didn't do the dishes, so I'm just going to do them and have a ugly face on and be like, no, it's fine, I'm just scrubbing, That's why resentment builds up, because there's no healthy release. And so that makes so much sense to me.
You were either not taught how to speak about your feelings openly, or you have, essentially. I remember just like even a couple weeks ago being in a friendship dynamic and being out with a group of friends, and someone, it comes from a place of hurt. One of the girls was extremely hurt, and there were a lot of like passive aggressive comments to someone, and it's, to me too. And I was like, okay, we're not doing this anymore. I was like, okay, what do you need to say? Let's say it right now. And she was hurt. She was so hurt, and she needed to get that out. You might recognize that my passive aggression, is that how you say it? Passive aggression?
That's how I say it, but okay. Don't quote me on that.
Another week of me not knowing how to say something. My passive aggression is not healthy. Like you probably know it's not, but in that moment, it's your only cry for help. And that's why it's so important to know this stuff, even if you're not dealing with it, so that you can kindly call it out in others to help them and to be there for them. And that brought a lot of awareness to her, and it was a really healing moment for all of us. It was great.
That circumstance that you're talking about really was a healing. It was a learning moment for everyone involved. And to much of your credit, I remember you said, like, I got to play therapist and it was just great, but no, and not in a bad way, but just because to your point, you have this toolbox already of what this looks like, and you have practical tools and tips and practices to help first identify it, and then B, get to the root of it, and then C, uproot it and get all of those words into a safe space, because, you know, in those kinds of circumstances, if someone's going to be vulnerable, they have to realize that I can say what I need to say without this person ghosting me or cutting me off completely. You know, they can be hurt. That's okay. But, you know, I don't know. I'm just kind of realizing maybe some of my codependency is on abandonment now. And
Hey, this is healing for me too. And you, like I always say, you're self-aware until you're not, you know, until that little someone like taps you on the shoulder and is like, hey, I think you're dealing with this. And kudos to those people who are wise and who have done the work to heal themselves to then call it out in others. I remember like
also
at
the
one
courage
point,
that takes.
and it especially, well, and that's why they can do it, because their identity is not attached to your reaction. Because if you're not healthy and secure, you might be afraid of how they might react to you. But if you are healthy and secure, it won't matter, because it's not gonna hurt you and it's not going to affect you. Okay, I think we're gonna go into now, in this article that I was reading, I don't think there's like specific, here's the 5 steps you can do to get out of your codependent system. I think one, that's probably something you really, really should talk to a therapist about, because they can pinpoint like, hey, this is probably where this is rooted from or started, because it is such a huge like spectrum. But I found this really cool article about journaling and what you can do on your own time, and 7 prompts and things you can journal about to help you recognize and become self-aware of your codependency habits. And I know you love to journal, so I thought
As soon as you said
like
prompt,
this.
my ears were like, huh? I love it. Yeah.
I don't journal, but
Why?
I just speak to myself out loud. That's what I do. I talk to myself.
Okay, so you just externally journal, verbally journal.
It's more efficient. I'm a 3.
I could see that. I think, okay, so to kind of go off of that, one of the things that I like about journaling is that I can go back and read, you know, 6 months later, be like, I was so dramatic. I have secondhand embarrassment reading that, but it was being authentic to who I was in that moment. And it helps me reconnect with that part of myself. And so I think that journaling as a healing technique, I cannot recommend enough, you know, even if it's just like making a vlog, just something to timestamp it where you just unleash, or like, you know, and you're able to, I can see you being like, pick on me.
Actually, I lied.
Yeah.
I do journal. You just need to open up my notes. I do journal.
Yes.
I guess I didn't realize that I just do it in another way. I don't get a piece of pen and paper, but I speak my thoughts into my notes. And you don't want to open it. We talk about, hey, let's read, let's do random.
Open it up. No, I'm just
history searches. Let's randomly speak out our history searches. No, let's randomly speak out read our notes, because that holds my whole heart and who I am.
I'm
Do you
reading
write
down
in
my
your
notes as yeah. It's disgusting how many notes that I have that are just like 2 words. Like I started a thought and then was like, squirrel.
Same. In my notes is actually a lot of the times, like not so much anymore, because I feel like my communication and my thoughts have become a little bit more concise to where I don't have to write long, massive notes. But if there were times where I felt like I couldn't verbalize what I wanted to say, I would just write it in my notes, and then I'd be like, read my phone. This is how I feel. And I think he
That's a
really
really good
appreciated
way.
it. I think
love that. That's so creative.
Yeah, well, I've always heard that women, they communicate with feelings and men communicate with thoughts. or logic, obviously. And that kind of takes like the emotion out of it to where they can hear it as logic, if that makes sense. And it's always been so effective. Depending on the situation, but we can go ahead into these 7 prompts and just kind of talk about them.
Yeah.
So, and these are just prompts for healing codependency. So, number 1, what can you do to focus more on yourself? I wrote here that people with codependency, they worry so much about others and what fulfillment they get from others that they mistake that for truly taking care of themselves and giving to themselves what really fulfills them. So, what do you think?
See, this is where it gets tricky, because as I was reading about codependency, it talked about how there's a side of it that a lot of people don't talk about, and it's kind of that depression, isolation place, as like an avenue where people go. That's a place that I think that I borderline a lot, because my go-to answer to that was get myself alone and make sure, like, in the context of, if there's no one else around me, that means that I'm not going to feel like I have to care for anybody else.
But then dissociating and being alone kind of doesn't tend to be the best thing for you either. Is that what you're saying?
No, because I'll put my phone on Do Not Disturb for 3 days straight, and I'll go, I'll just sit and probably ruminate. And this isn't so much the case for me anymore. This is like me kind of in the thick of my codependency, but I would tell myself that that's what I needed, and it wasn't. So now what I would do is, I think I would get out and go for a walk. I'd put on a podcast and I would go for a walk. It's physically getting myself out of my house, and it's doing something that over time there will be results. A walk is a low impact thing. There's so many health benefits to it, but I think that that's what I would do.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think when you spoke about, like, you would ruminate on your alone time. So yeah, it just depends how you're spending that alone time for yourself. For me, when I think back to situations where I felt like codependent, for me, it would come down to feeling secure, even though the situation wasn't. What would help me to focus more on my thoughts? I think it comes down to healing that inner child, because that's where that codependency started. That's the root of it, was an unhealed child. And it would be, like we spoke about in our inner child episode, just imagining yourself as that kid and verbally speaking out loud, just healing words to that child and re-securing myself in that moment. That's so what good. I would write about. Okay, number 2, what boundaries do you need to start setting? So codependent people create an identity for themselves, for what they can do and be for others, that they stretch themselves so thin. They may also allow someone else's suffering to be all that they think about, to the point to where it becomes their own suffering. So where can boundaries play a place in that?
I think for me, it came with really committing myself to understand that I'm my own person. And I say committing myself to understand because it is a process, but it's one that you have to intentionally commit to. You have to really make up your mind about wanting to understand that more, because when you're in the thick of it, and when you have absolutely no sense of who you are anymore, and you don't know that, you're just like, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is loving and this is great. Oftentimes in those circumstances, I found that people that are really codependent don't even realize that their identity is put in the wrong place. So when you're setting that boundary of really fully coming to terms with the fact that you are your own person and you are not responsible for the emotions of someone else. You can care for and like take heed to the emotions of other people, but at the end of the day their response is not your responsibility. And
Yes.
that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'd circle back to what I said earlier, where you don't need to save anyone else, and you need to allow people to come to terms with their own dysfunction. You can, identify that, but if they're not ready to see it, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say. The best thing you can do is not allow yourself to become their crutch when they need saving. So
It's so hard. It can feel ruthless. It can feel so mean, but it's the kindest thing that you can do for that person
yeah.
and yourself.
Number 3, how can you begin to detach from unhealthy situations? I wrote detachment is the best form you can do in codependent relationships, and that can look like letting go of your own control or your own desire to have control and allowing a situation to play out. It means saving your own sanity and not trying to save someone else. That's from my experience for what codependency has looked through the lens of my life. Yeah, it's also letting go from your desire to feel fulfilled in doing for others, I think.
I would argue that there are several different appropriate responses to these prompts based off of the nature of the codependency in that specific relationship. Because, and I think this kind of goes back again to why there is no one definition of it. There are so many different flavors of it. For me, with detaching from the unhealthy situation, going no contact was my only option to save any kind of future that I had with my dad. And I think that that's probably a response that a lot of people are quick to do now these days, where they'll just cut someone out. And I have some thoughts about that, but I think, yeah, it just depends on the nature of the codependency, and it depends on the relationship. It depends on your involvement, or like how much of it are you actually responsible for. There's a lot of variables in these situations. Agreed. For me, it was just going no contact with my dad.
Yeah, agreed. There are so many different ways to identify these things in yourself, and things you can do to identify, to help yourself heal that codependency issue, because everyone deals with it differently, and it's a different dynamic depending on the relationship you have and your own history. Number 4, how can you stop worrying about what others think about you? I wrote, from my personal experience, provide yourself the validation you seek from others.
As Joe says in Princess Diaries, as he's quoting Eleanor Roosevelt, nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent.
Ooh, that's good.
Mic drop. That's all I have to say on that one.
Yeah, we'll end it there. We're going to keep that one short and sweet because... Yeah. Number 5, how can you let go of trying to be perfect and avoid making mistakes? Give yourself grace and at the same time, humble yourself. I wrote this one thing in here and I love it. I remember when I got into real estate and sales. In sales and cold calling, you have to completely lose your humility, or you have to completely lose your humility in order to freaking do a sale, because salespeople are ruthless. So something I learned through my sales journey that has helped me just live a more authentic life is every day go do something that humiliates you. Do one little thing that makes you think, not less about yourself, but less of yourself. Wait, did I say that right?
Ooh,
Not,
yeah.
yeah,
Less about yourself, but less of yourself. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah. You don't need to think
Wow.
lower of yourself. You just need to think of yourself less.
I have
You
no
don't need to
notes.
put yourself down. Just stop thinking about yourself so much because you're not the center of attention.
Girl. Preach.
Thank
Preach.
you,
Preach.
real estate.
This is my TED Talk.
I think this next one is big. Where can you ask for help or support? Codependent people do not like to ask for help because they feel like they're a burden on others. And this would be my biggest thing, is not asking for help.
No. Why would you do that? I'm just kidding. That was me being sarcastic. There are so many resources, almost an overwhelming amount. Like, if you're not in a place where you can comfortably speak about your experience with someone, I know there are groups like Codependence Anonymous and podcasts, and there are so many different resources for you to help acclimate yourself to codependency or just kind of learning about it more. And then, taking those steps and practicing them. Obviously get a therapist. I think everybody should get a therapist. There are so many people that could benefit from it. But no, there is a lot of resources and a lot of help out there. And it just takes, again, that, to your point, you have to humiliate yourself and you have to realize that you're worthy of getting the help and support that you need. And that there are people that so desperately want to help you.
Yes, that's what I was going to say is you may think you're a burden, but you don't realize that because you think that, you're probably putting on a persona of how well kept you really are and how put together you really are. Your friends and family members may not even know that you're struggling, and it's not up to them to figure it out. That's not fair. It's okay to ask someone for help, whether you need a night to yourself to really prioritize your thoughts and you need a night away from your kids. You might not realize how much someone actually really wants to help you. But you have to put that step forward. That's something I had to learn. I remember once I was moving and I really thought this friend, like I remember telling this friend I'm moving several times. They knew I was moving and I was really hoping they would offer to help. I was not in like a financial position to hire movers, but I never verbalized, hey, can you help me? And then after, I was so upset, I made a passive aggressive comment and they just got me right there. They were like, well, you never asked for my help. I would have gladly come and help you. I thought you just had it all handled. I was like, how dare you speak facts?
How dare you not meet my unverbalized needs? How dare you not anticipate them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh.
So I think that's super important, asking for help. And then last but not least, number 7, another thing to ponder on. How can you begin to trust your own perceptions and feelings? Practice listening to your gut and intuition.
I say follow it, see where it leads, and reroute if needed. It is a journey. And the only way that you can learn to trust yourself again is to be okay with failing and to be okay with like hearing yourself wrong. It's the only way that you can build trust and discernment in yourself again. And you have to realize that if you do end up like making a misstep, you know not to do that again. And you know what that feels like in your body when you heard that, and you know to ignore that next time. Or there's so much grace, as you said earlier. There's so much grace in using that as a tool instead of an excuse. Big thing.
That's so good. You just taught me something there. I didn't even like put that together, that the more you recognize your own mistakes and are more self-aware of your own bad habits and patterns, the more you realize, the more you learn to trust your own gut. Because how can you trust your gut and intuition if you think you're always right? Something's not right there, You
have to fail. You have to have missteps and moments where, you may have thought that you'd let yourself down, but it's ultimately getting you to where you're looking to go, and it's building back your relationship with yourself at the same time. It's a really beautiful thing. 10 out of 10 recommend.
I would
So
say
good.
that those who are in the gut triad of the Enneagram, I feel like they probably struggle with this the most. They tend to think they're right all the time, my way or the highway. And because they have such strong gut intentions, but I feel like you can discern your gut and your instincts wrong based on like what you've been through and based on how you've perceived what is my gut telling me. I think I'm going down a hole here.
No, I agree with that. And I think this is kind of what I'm getting from what you said. Sometimes logic and the right thing to do look different. Sometimes like the thing that your intuition is telling you to do isn't logical, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. I think that that's kind of where, for me, like the supernatural comes in, or like that's where my faith kind of comes in, where I'm like, I don't need to have all of the answers right now to act or to do something. I just need to trust that I have the discernment here and that I'm going to learn what I need to learn out of this. I think that it's meant to balance us again, because people in the gut triad need to be brought out of that more, you know, and
Humble
same with
yourself.
thinkers. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
people that
yeah.
overthinkers. It's when you
And then
have
us
too
heart
much of it.
people, us heart people can get out of the codependency box. Yeah. Yeah, there's something for everyone in the Enneagram. We should talk about the Enneagram more.
Why haven't we?
Yeah, I know.
Super
It's coming.
serious question.
It's coming. Well, this was great. I learned a lot from this already, and it was a good refresher on a topic that I don't really revisit that much. So I really hope our listeners got something out of it too.
Hey, I did. At the very least, I did.
Me too.
I'm going to have a lot to have to make note of to speak about with my therapist next Wednesday. So,
That's good.
but this was so good.
Yeah.
And props to Matt for leading us to talk about this today. I hope
Yep.
that you have a wonderful 4th.
Cheers to independence.
Cheers.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Well, bye.